Hey, everybody. Welcome. So glad to be here with you all tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. So I'm glad that you're here. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night chat. We're going to follow our usual format, which is first the opening remarks, then the roll call, and then I answer your questions for the remainder of the show. So if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, you can send me a Rumble rant. You can cash at me at CalebMaupin22, but the best way to do it is to go to buymeacoffee.com/CalebMaupin. You can be anonymous. It just says someone. You can talk as long as you want. I've had people send me whole manifestos before. It's a great way to send your question and support the show. So please do that. Now, I do want to remind you all that this YouTube channel is not simply a mechanism for me to get on here and ramble. This YouTube channel is about building an in real life activist organization intended to save our country from the nightmare of globalism, imperialism, to bring about a government of action to fight for working families. And that organization is called the Center for Political Innovation. That's us, the Center for Political Innovation, a great organization. We're doing great stuff. We got some exciting activities planned for the end of this month. Details still in the works, but a lot of great things are happening. So become a member today. Become a member of the Center for Political Innovation, cpiusa.org. We're always doing great stuff. We'd love to plug you into our work as a real anti-imperialist group doing real activism and organizing. Now, we're going to follow, like I said, our usual format for tonight. So if you've got a question for me to answer in the second half of the show, Rumble rants, you can cash at me at CalebMaupin22, or you can, the absolute best way to do it is go to buymeacoffee.com/CalebMaupin, and you can send me your question. You can do this, if you're watching this later, if you're not watching live, you're watching afterwards, you can leave your question and I'll do it in the next stream. It's just a really great way to do it. Buymeacoffee.com is the best way to interact with the show, send questions. All right. So tonight, I wanted to just let you know, I did start a little bit later than usual tonight. We were about 6 minutes behind schedule. I'd like to start on time. The reason we were 6 minutes behind schedule is because I was getting together an interesting panel discussion with two friends of the show for tomorrow evening. And I was doing the final details of getting that in order. It's going to be really neat. It's going to be something very, very special tomorrow. So look forward to that. It'll be great tune in tomorrow night. It's going to be a very interesting discussion that might go in a lot of different places. We're going to have two guests on here from different backgrounds. One of them is a CPI member. One of them is not, but both of them are our friends, and both of them have been on this channel before a couple times. and they're going to be reacting to a song that has a lot to say about a lot of the topics that we talk about on this stream. I don't want to give too much away. It's just going to be a really interesting show tomorrow night. So try to watch tomorrow night if you can. It's going to be a really, really interesting discussion. I am convinced this is going to be an interesting panel because I know these two guests, and these are both really smart individuals, and they're going to be reacting to something they've never heard before, and they come from very different backgrounds, and I am going to be fascinated by this. I thought of this, and I thought this is going to be a good show. So tune in tomorrow night. Anyway, just wanted to get that off my chest. Folks, I was out in the streets all day, and it was a rainy day, interviewing people about the war on Iran. I'm doing a lot of Vox Pops lately. If you've been watching this channel, I've been posting them. You know, I go out on the street, me and my camera guy, we go out and we interview people about the war in Iran, and we get people's opinions. And I was doing that all day today, and it was very productive. Honestly, I'm really glad that that is part of my job because it enables me to be in touch with regular people that I would not normally go looking to talk to. I talked to people that supported this war. I talked to people that were against this war. I talked to people who really didn't know anything about it and don't pay attention to the news. I talked to young people, old people, white people, black people, men, women. New York City is it's a real mix of people, you know, and I've noticed when I go out, you know, there's never been a day that I only get men. I always get a few women. There's never been a day that I only talk to white people. I always get a few people of color. It just happens that way. I stand there and I just try to interview. I'd say answer a question for the news, and it always kind of evens out because New York City is so diverse. And I just talk to anyone who will talk to me, and I try to talk to as many people as I can. And today I was out in the streets, asking people about what they thought about the war in Iran. And public opinion is pretty strongly against, though I do meet a couple people that support it, right? And there were a couple people who supported it. There were a couple people who told me, well, if it turns out well, it'll be worth it. But right now it doesn't look like it's good. I thought that was an interesting answer. But public opinion is overwhelmingly against this war. And as I have said before on these streams, public opinion divides into about three when it comes to this war. 50% just hate Trump, and anything Trump does, they hate. 25% blindly support Trump, and there's another 25% that, that were on Trump's side, but when this war got going, they feel that MAGA and the principles of Make America Great Again have been betrayed. And so that's where people line up. And I have argued that the most important constituency is that third percentage, what I call the dissident MAGA, the people that supported Trump because they didn't like the American political establishment. They wanted to end the wars. They wanted a stronger economy. But now that Trump is in office and not delivering on that and doing the opposite, they're angry with him. And I've talked about how Tucker Carlson is now facing legal threats. They may try to prosecute Tucker Carlson for his anti-war speech and the anti-war interviews that he's been doing, which is crazy, right? All of this is very relevant to what I'm about to talk about. Folks, there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, right? And being a human being means that you are endowed with a certain creative ability that no other species has. Human beings are the creative creatures. Human beings in just 7,000 to 8,000 years have gone from hunter-gatherers in the woods, tribal primitive civilization, to space travel and iPhones and artificial intelligence and computers. No other species is capable of doing what we're doing. Ants make their ant colonies and their ant farms the same way, have been doing so for thousands of years. Bees have been making their beaver dams same way, thousands of years. Bees have been making their beehives the same way for thousands of years. But if you look at what we've achieved as a species in terms of population expansion, in terms of life expectancy expansion, in terms of making life more comfortable, human beings have achieved amazing things in just the last 100 years. Human beings are unparalleled. There is no other species like us, and biology cannot explain that. And I believe that it is that reality that points to the existence of God. God is the creator of all things, and human beings are endowed with a certain godlike ability. We are creative creatures. We have a soul, and we have the ability to take the environment around us and reinvent our relationship with it to rise to a higher plane. That's uniquely human. And that understanding has helped me to understand how human beings have gone from hunter-gatherer civilization to slavery to feudalism to capitalism. And now, as the planet is being held under the grip of monopolistic globalism, imperialism, we have countries around the world that are breaking out of that. There's a new economy rising in the East, centered around Russia and China. And this understanding has enabled me to transcend both the left and the right and develop a viewpoint that celebrates human creativity and calls for a government of action that fights for working families and invests in communities and invests in people. Right now, we have a government that sometimes is in complete dereliction of duty. Right? If you're a parent and your child is going to school in the wintertime without warm clothes, you can be arrested. You're a parent and your child is starving, right, and skinny and malnourished, you can be arrested. And when they arrest you, they're not arresting you for what you did. They're arresting you for what you did not do, right? They're arresting you for criminal neglect. And I would argue that largely the government of the United States is guilty of criminal neglect. If you look at the roads that are crumbling, if you look at the rate of drug addiction, if you look at the quality or lack thereof when it comes to American education, the government of the United States is guilty of criminal neglect. We, the people, have been left behind while our government is focused on defending an international system to enrich the profits of big bankers and monopolies. And that when our government is not engaging in criminal neglect and just letting the country rot, they are actively engaging in degrowth, whether it's their Green New Deal, which intends to basically de-electrify America, whether it's some of the Malthusian policies that they like to impose, whether it's the prison industrial complex where the economy is stimulated by locking people in jail, whether it's the military industrial complex where we go and bomb and degrow countries to destroy competitors and maintain the dominance of Western corporations. That we have a government that is anti-human and anti-growth, right? And a lot of times that government just sits back and doesn't invest in the economy and doesn't invest in the people. And in other cases, the government actively degrows with fascist economics, where they're, grinding people into poverty, creating a prison slave labor underclass, creating wars and all of that. And what we need is the opposite. We need a pro-humanity, pro-growth government, a government that invests in people, and that, the vision for doing so is on the CPI website. If we had a mass mobilization, hiring millions of Americans to go rebuild the country, pave the roads, new infrastructure, new universities, new schools, new power plants. If we had a public ownership of our natural resources, and oil and gas and coal and timber and all the natural wealth of America was in the public budget, and the wealth of it went into the public budget, and the burden of taxation was taken off the population. If in addition to that, we created a national bank that injected credit strategically into parts of this country that were struggling as part of an overall vision for rebuilding the country. If we enacted an economic bill of rights as an investment to make sure that the American people were healthy, with healthcare, to make sure the American people had education, to make sure the American people were fully employed, utilizing the labor power of every person. If we enacted those 4 steps, that would be transitioning the United States toward joining the New World and breaking out of imperialism. And it would be a popular victory toward moving toward a government of action that fights for working families. Now, that's what we need. And that's the vision of the Center for Political Innovation. And it puts us at odds with the right, because in America, the right wing has become synonymous with the worship of capitalism, right? Conservatism is supposed to be about defending the family. It's supposed to be about defending traditional values. It's supposed to be about people being loyal to their country, loyal to their community, but it's not. Now, conservatism just means you love capitalism and you want to privatize everything. And it puts us at odds with the left, because the left historically was about the working class and having a government that fought for the people against the rich and powerful. But that's all been forgotten. If you believe that, you're a Nazi. And we've now been told that being on the left means that you're obsessed with all things below the belt and rainbow flags, and you hate straight white men and want to tear them down, and you want to burn this evil racist country to the ground because everyone here is an evil, rotten, racist Nazi. And it's just, and both sides celebrate liberalism. They're both expressions of liberalism. On the right, it is economic liberalism. On the left, it is social liberalism, but it's liberalism. That's what is the ideology. And it is about breaking down any sense of collectivism. It's about atomizing human beings, reducing them to isolated individuals so the rich and powerful can roll over all of us. Whereas what we need is a movement that is collective, that says we need to take the future of our country into our hands. We need to break our country out of imperialism, and we need to have a state that actively invests in us and is working to make sure that life gets better for us. We need a government of action that fights for working families. Now, that is the Center for Political Innovation perspective. Historically, throughout my life, I've been a socialist and a communist, and I when it comes to economics, when it comes to anti-imperialism, I'm still there. When it comes to the philosophy behind it, the dialectical worldview and the obsession with libidinal and rebellion, I'm not there. When it comes to the culture war that the left is waging, I'm not doing that. I'm not left or right. I am pro-human. I'm pro-growth. I'm pro-humanity. And I do look at what has happened in the 20th century because of the Soviet Union, because of the Chinese Revolution. Many countries around the world have broken out of Western domination and have began, independent development with governments rooted in anti-colonial revolutions that are actively trying to build up the country. And the reason Iran is being attacked right now is because the Islamic Republic of Iran had a revolution against imperialism, right? And the Islamic Republic is deeply conservative as Shia Muslims, but their conservatism means they have an economy that is centrally planned, and they invest in their people, and they have done a lot to eradicate poverty and build their country up in opposition to the West, in opposition to globalism, imperialism. And they're allies of the Palestinians in their fight against Israel, and they're allies. They were allies of the African National Congress and Nelson Mandela. They were allies of the IRA and the Irish freedom struggle. All over the world, when people have been struggling against imperialism, the Islamic Republic has stood with them, and they're not Marxists. They are Shia Muslims. And, there are other countries around the world now, and largely now classical Soviet-style communism is not what these countries are embracing, whether it's socialism with Chinese characteristics in China, whether it's, the new Russian patriotism and all of that in Russia, the Russian Orthodox tradition, and a lot of that. You can talk about what's been going on in Latin America with Bolivarianism. There's the Union of Sahel States and the great African leader Ibrahim Traore. It's not communism. It's not the same old communism, but that's okay. It's moved beyond that. It's transcended to a higher plane, and that there is a new world rising. The only future that America is going to have is joining this new world. And right now, President Trump, who appealed to people's desire to not have wars, who appealed to people's desire to have the government actively work to build up the economy with his Make America Great Again campaign, has betrayed everything that campaign has stood for. Americans are getting poorer. Wages are going down. Inflation, the cost of food, the cost of gas is going up. Americans are being more tightly squeezed, and it's happening in part because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and we're now waging a war that has absolutely nothing to gain for the American people, a war to defend this globalist imperialist system. And because of that, Donald Trump has betrayed the people who he voted for, and he is actively waging a war to defend globalism and imperialism. And he's even using some woke language. He says it's about liberating gay people and liberating women. And it's all just malarkey, right? And we are now seeing Trump has sold out the people who voted for him. And Trump, it was never a good leader. He wasn't good in his first term. He did some pretty awful stuff in his first term, but this takes the cake. He's doing a really shitty job in his second term, and he's spit in the face of his base, of all the people who voted for him. And we have no choice but to keep organizing. And that's what we are doing as the Center for Political Innovation. We have to build a movement. A movement is urgently needed. We need to educate the American people about anti-imperialism. We need to build a network of people who understand these concepts. We need community centers, etc. That is what we need. And so we're going to do it. We're going to build this movement. But today, in addition to interviewing people on the streets of New York City, which was very refreshing and good for me to do. And I don't argue with people, by the way. A lot of people are scared to be interviewed because they think it's a gotcha. I don't gotcha. I just let people talk. I'm not there to debate people. I'm there to just get their opinions. And what people say is very, very interesting to me. And I'm really, really glad that I do that. But anyhow, so I finished my work and I went and sat down to have lunch, and I looked on Twitter and I looked on X. It's not called Twitter any longer. It's called X. And I had two conversations that just fell into my lap. And, I don't generally want to do live streams about Twitter drama because we can do better than that, right? Years ago in New York City, we had 2 CPI classes where I invited 2 different people to give presentations. And both of them gave shitty presentations because they were reading off their phones the whole time and arguing with people on Twitter. And that's not productive. And so I almost hesitate. I worry that I will be repeating mistakes I've seen others make by doing this stream. The only reason that I am talking about the Twitter drama that happened after I did my interviews on the street is because I want you all to see this, because basically a right-winger started arguing with me, a right-wing libertarian, and then a Marxist started arguing with me. And both of them revealed what's wrong with both sides. So I've screenshotted both conversations. It was really just one conversation. And I just want to go over the exchange here because I would like you all to see this. And I feel like this is representative of what's wrong with American discourse. And Noah is right, because talking to people on the street was not like this, right? The conversations I had with people on the street, it was not like this. These are both people that are very, very focused on their point of view. A very, very focused right-wing libertarian from the Mises Caucus, a very, very focused Marxist on the internet. That's why I wanted to highlight both of them on the stream here. So at risk of looking like a total nerd, I'm going to show the conversations that I had, but I want you all to see this because both the left and the right are fucked, and they're fucked for different reasons. And we're going to talk about that here tonight. And the polemic, right, is one of the best ways to articulate what you believe, right? You look at Marx, right? Look at all of Marx's major works. The Critique of the Goethe Program. What is it? It's a critique, right? Some people met in Goethe in Germany and they wrote a program, and Marx said, no, this is all wrong. And he wrote the Critique of the Goethe Program. You read, Marx wrote this book called The Poverty of Philosophy. Well, it was a play on words because at the time there was a best-selling book that was very popular by Proudhon. It was called The Philosophy of Poverty. And so he wrote The Poverty of Philosophy as a lampoon on this popular socialist book. And that by arguing, you can make your views more clear by addressing someone else's views. And that's the way these things work. And so I'm going to show you first how, and it's funny because the conversations led right into each other. So it's really just one conversation. It's just one guy kind of tagged out and another guy tagged in. But anyway, so it all started with Angela McCurdle, who's a good friend of mine, who's a Libertarian Party person. We gave her an award at the CPI convention last summer because she organized the Rage Against the War Machine protest. Angela McCurdle is a really, really committed libertarian. Doesn't agree with me on a lot, right? Has a completely different perspective on many things. Mises Caucus, libertarian, but she is anti-war, solidly anti-war, and is somewhat sympathetic to Russia and China. Very solidly anti-war, very opposed to hawkishness, etc. So Angela, she posted basically that some kind of gathering about reasserting the principles that MAGA stood for, about reasserting the foundations of anti-war MAGA or whatever is about to be called. Great. I think that's awesome. I can't wait to find out what it is. So I posted, that sounds great, do tell. And so immediately I got this response from David Brady Jr. Get out of here, socialist. Okay. So then he posted, friendly reminder, that the America First Committee banned communists and fascists from joining because they were correctly seen as anti-American ideologies. Well, that's not true. That's just not factually accurate. That is not the truth. The America First Committee, that was an anti-war organization that was formed in the late 1930s, like I think 1940, with the intention of keeping the USA out of the Second World War, had within its ranks Norman Thomas of the Socialist Party, who was like their token leftist. But in addition to that, there was an overwhelming number of sympathizers with Nazi Germany. And in fact, that's actually widely written about. Elizabeth Dilling of the German-American Bund was a member. And that the America First Committee had loads of people that were critical of capitalism, right? There were Socialist Party, Norman Thomas supporters. I believe Smedley Butler and some of his followers were involved with it. But in addition to that, there were lots of people who were National Socialists, i.e. Nazis. And I don't think that was socialism, but that's a whole nother conversation. But regardless, there were many, many people in the America First Committee who were admirers of, some interpretation or some understanding of socialism. But David doesn't think that's true because he thinks the America First Committee was good. And no good person could ever be a socialist, and so I got into it back and forth with him about Smedley Butler. And I said, and he talked about Smedley Butler's death. And I said, now, Smedley Butler, was he a bad person? Because he was a socialist. Smedley Butler, the general in the U.S. Marine Corps who quit the Marines and wrote War is a Racket. He was a socialist, Quaker. He became a Quaker and a socialist. Was he a bad person? But it's, again, he's got this neoconservative mindset. All commies are bad, and he thinks all leftists are communists, which, he knows nothing about actual communism. He's got the understanding of a Jordan Peterson video or a Solzhenitsyn thing. And, clearly the America First Committee didn't have any communists or fascists in it, which is completely false. There were loads of fascists and a few token leftist socialists like Norman Thomas and others involved. That's just not actually true, but it must be true because he feels that the America First Committee was good. It was good. And, if something is good, no socialist or communist could be involved in it, right? And that's how they feel. But anyway, so, we had our back and forth. So then he comes at me for being a socialist. How could you possibly be a socialist? And I said, what does socialism even mean? I'm not a woke teenager. I'm also not trying to recreate the USSR. I'm an innovationist. We have given up on arguing with people about what words mean, which I think was a very, very fair point, right? When Americans think about socialism, they generally think of, woke teenager who thinks all Republicans are Nazis, is obsessed with the trans issue, and wants the government, their understanding of socialism is the government gives people free stuff. It gives people a welfare thing. Well, that's not what we understand socialism to be, right? We're not that. And on top of that, we recognize that the Soviet model of doing things is not coming back. If you look at countries that even come out of the Marxist-Leninist tradition, like China, like Vietnam, like Cuba, they have a different system. They have, they utilize the market. In Vietnam, it's a socialism-oriented market economy, they call it. China, they have socialism with Chinese characteristics. That the idea of the state completely owning everything, like they did in the USSR, that's not, in vogue. That's just not what, countries are doing nowadays. And as anti-imperialists and as people who want a world beyond globalism, imperialism, on the one hand, we're not like the woke people that just want some version of social democracy with a rainbow flag attached to it. And we're not like, we're not trying to rebuild the USSR and go back to the past. We're interested in what countries that have broken out of Western imperialism do. I mean, in Iran, they have the resistance economy. Gaddafi's Libya, he built, the Islamic Socialist Jamara or whatever he called it, and Ibrahim Traore, I don't even think they call it socialism of any kind there, but it's, what Ibrahim Traore is doing in Burkina Faso, what's happening in the Union of Sahel States. I mean, this is utilizing market mechanisms, but it's a pro-growth government, right? That's what I'm for. And we've given up trying to call that socialism because socialists don't want that. And it just confuses everybody. We're innovationists. We're for a pro-humanity, pro-growth government. Okay, so I say, what does socialism even mean? Well, this is where it was almost like, professional wrestling. They have the tag team, right? Where it's like, tap out, tap in. All right. Well, Brady, the Mises Caucus guy, he jumped out, and the Dr. Bipolar Marxist jumped in with what his definition of socialism was. A workers' socialist state when the proletariat owns the means of production and wields political control over the surplus value that we produce. As a member of the working class, I sell my labor power. As a Marxist communist, I organize labor. A workers' socialist state when the proletariat owns the means of production, wields political power over surplus value. As a member of the working class, I sell my labor power. As a Marxist communist, I organize labor. Okay. And so I believe I replied to him by saying, is my response on here? Where's my response? Is my response here? But okay, well, I said to him, when has that ever happened? When has that, ever happened, what you're describing there? And I was pointing out that what he's describing there, which is the wage workers by themselves, right? As the only, he says the proletariat owns the means of production, no other classes, the wage workers themselves overthrowing and having sole political power and having total control over the surplus value that they produce. I said that's never actually happened anywhere. I mean, that's just never actually happened anywhere. In the Soviet Union, it was a revolutionary dictatorship of the workers and the peasants. And then when they took power after the Civil War, they instituted market reforms and began having the government build up private entrepreneurs that had employers. And then they used the state to nationalize everything with the 5-year plans. In China, the revolution was the block of 4 great classes: the workers, the peasants, the urban merchants, and the national bourgeoisie, the national capitalists. And that revolutions in the developing world, revolutions have always happened on the basis of the liberation of the entire nation, with the working class in an alliance with other classes. There has never been a pure working class revolution. The only place that could happen would be in the first world. And we've never had a Marxist revolution in the first world. Never have we had a situation where the wage workers take control of the government and thus with their government are controlling all. There's no one making profits from anyone else's. That's just never happened, right? That's the classic Marxist understanding, but it didn't happen. And then in about 1900, we had the crisis of Marxism because it wasn't happening. And out of the crisis of Marxism, we got Bolshevism. And Bolshevism was the revolutionary movement of Russia that said national liberation and oppressed nations struggling against imperialism can be good. And on top of that, it talked about having an alliance with the peasantry, and it talked about capitalism entering this stage of monopolistic imperialism, and said we should support capitalists that are opposing imperialism, and supported the emir of Afghanistan, supported the Egyptian merchants, supported anybody who was struggling against the imperialists, and had no interest in even if it was a proletarian organization, if it was supporting imperialism and colonizing and oppressing people, they didn't support it. And so I'm trying to make the point to him that, this hyper Marxist definition of socialism, that doesn't work. Right? That's not actually what has ever existed anywhere in the world. What we have had is governments that are up against imperialism, that build kind of a working class movement in alliance with other classes and fight for the liberation of an entire nation. That's what we have. And they build centrally planned economies where profits are not in command. But the dogmatic, pure Marxist definition of socialism has never come into being. Now, I thought that I was having an argument with Mr. Bipolar Marxist about what a word meant, right? I know nothing about this person. I've never met this person. I have no idea who they are in real life. This is the response, right? Yes, I understand. I don't come from a college area, kind of like you. We have disagreements in prison. Thank you so much for your time, sir. By the way, I gave you a definition of what socialism was, and you don't like it. My apologies for explaining what we go through in the working class. I'm at a college-educated person like you, Caleb. My apologies, sir, so please don't badmouth me. Nobody's doing anything like that, Kevin. I'm sorry to bother you. I don't know who Kevin is. Feel free to go back to your side of the street. I will never bother you again. Dude, no one's insulting your intelligence. I'm just pointing out that the classical Marxist revolution has never happened, that I'm trying to engage with you about what the word socialism means, right? Caleb, I was respectful. We twist the conversation. I'm just a working class person, and that's an issue for you. I'm so sorry to bother you. Come work with us for an 8-hour shift, and we'll crawl under houses until the boss sits in luxury. We'll talk about surplus value being produced by human labor. When you're ready to have a conversation about working class struggle, let me know, right? I'm going to go research and asking you for class interest. I like how Caleb won't answer what class he is from or what his class interests are. I mean, this guy he suddenly becomes a personal thing. And this guy refers to himself. You can go read the thread. He claims, he claims to be a disabled person with a criminal record, is what he's saying he is. That sucks. And I'm sorry to hear that he's disabled. I'm sorry to hear that he's had time in prison. Our prison system in America is horrible. But he just goes from there, and it immediately turns into, woe is me. My life is so miserable, and you're a bad person, for disagreeing with me. And I said to him, I tried to have an adult conversation with you about the meaning of a word. You turned it into, I'm a disabled convicted felon. You went to college. You have a bigger account than me. Show me anything you've done for the class struggle. No one ever insulted you or questioned your integrity or commitment or intelligence. I know nothing about you. I'm simply responding to you. I was pointing out some problems, classical Marxist thinking, and how things have played out. If you want to go organize workers, you'll probably have to deal with a lot more aggressive disagreement than I've ever shown you. I mean, this is where we're at. And these two individuals, this Brady and this bipolar Marxist, are perfectly representative of their groups, right? So Brady, right, he hates communists, right? And his mindset is, I don't like woke people. I don't like woke people either, and they don't like me. Woke people are all communists, and they all need to be killed. And I'm literally agreeing with someone he supports, who's also in the Mises caucus, Angela McArdle, and saying, let's build an anti-war movement. And no, you have the wrong view. And he's just motivated. He has rage at woke people. He thinks woke people are Marxists. He thinks I must be a woke person, and as I pointed out to him that, even the people in his beloved America First committee believed in some anti-capitalist theory, right? That people who believe in market worship, the Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand shit, that is a really, really, really rare thing in history and internationally. If you go to the developing world, very, very few people in the third world, except for very rich people, are going around talking about we need the free market. On the right, they need, nationalist economics. On the left, they want socialist economics. Nobody. You go to the African continent, right? And you poll people. Should the government get rid of all the social programs? Everyone's going to say, no, that's like, we're barely surviving here. We depend on that. If you go to Asia and you say, oh, should the government just stay out of the economy? They're going to be like, no. Look at the Asian tiger countries. The government, under Park Chung-hee in South Korea, under Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, the government built the notion that the government shouldn't be involved in the economy and that we should just have the market do everything. Javier Milei might think that. And a lot of people that have been, trained in academic institutions in America think that. But around the world, people don't think that, right? That is just not something they think. And historically, people don't think that, right? That's the British Empire ideology. That's the ideology of Adam Smith. And no one would have ever talked about fascism or communism or socialism or any of that stuff if that stuff hadn't failed massively on a global scale. If there had not been famines all over the planet because of the free market in India, in Ireland, in Asia, in the African continent, if neoliberal, free market policies had not been an absolute disaster, no one would have ever even talked about anything else, right? And that, what American conservatives believe, this belief that the market is just magic and solves everything, The America First Committee folks did not believe that. And there are pages and pages and books about how they believed in National Socialism. A lot of them, they were Nazis. It was basically a Hitler fan club. And I said, I would not have been in the America First Committee. I think World War II was justified. I think it was good that we fought Hitler. I think it was good we fought the Japanese imperialists. But even this America First Committee, go and read what they said. Go and read Elizabeth Dilling. Go and read Charles Lindbergh. Go and read what America First Committee fascists were saying. They didn't believe in the free market. And he thinks they were good people, and all good people think what he thinks. Well, he's in for a rude awakening, because internationally and historically, market worship is a minority view, right? I mean, very few people in the world think that we should just privatize everything and the free market will just naturally fix itself. And in fact, if you study economics, people study market failures. Why do you think we have antitrust laws? Why do you think that we created the Federal Reserve Bank to begin with? The capitalists themselves come together and figure out ways to stabilize the economy, right? Why do you think, there's all kinds of laws that we've invented just to make the market kind of work better. The government, as I've said many times on here, buys millions of dollars worth of cheese and buries it in a cave in Missouri just to keep the price of dairy high enough. You do realize that, right? We have a whole Department of Agriculture that's constantly trying to use farm subsidies and all kinds of mechanisms from crashing the American agricultural sector, because if the market just naturally worked with all the food we're producing, the prices would go down and the economy, the agricultural sector would crash, right? That the free market has big problems. And Mises Caucus libertarian people say stuff about economics that is just malarkey. They say things like no monopoly would exist if it wasn't for the government. False. In fact, you have what's called natural monopolies. Yes, monopolies do exist without the government. And in fact, the government, at the behest of capitalists, creates all kinds of laws to prevent monopolies just to keep the market from having monopolistic stagnation. Right? Libertarians say all kinds of shit that even like Adam Smith would never have said, right? That this idea that you can just get the government out, the government just stays out, everything magically works. That's not actually true. And no one even really believes this. It's just an ideology used to justify austerity. Nobody talked this way until the early 70s, until the end of the post-World War II economic expansion. No one talked that way. And if you look at what was the largest episode of growth in human history, the largest episode of prolonged growth in human history was the post-World War II economic expansion. After World War II, almost every major city in Western Europe had been destroyed. Almost every major city in Asia had been destroyed. And the USA was at the center of the world economy, and the world started rebuilding. And there was a massive amount of economic expansion all over the world. And, 1946, 47 until 1971 to 73 was a period where there has never been more economic growth. It was a huge episode of economic growth. And where was this economic growth happening? In America, it was happening at the height of the welfare state. In the 1950s, coming out of the Roosevelt administration, rich people paid a lot more taxes. Labor unions were very, very, very strong and protected by law. And in Western Europe, what did you have? You had the emergence of the welfare state, guaranteed employment in France, guaranteed employment in Britain, state ownership of the steel industry in Britain, state ownership of the railways in Britain. You had a national health service being created in every single post-World War II country. They were building a national healthcare system. These were not free market policies. And according to them, it's the free market that naturally creates growth. Well, it's funny because the period when all the growth was happening post-World War II, there wasn't no free markets going on in the first world. And in the third world, what did you have? Well, first of all, communism, right? Why was China on the road to raising millions of people out of poverty? Why did China build its first power plants and its first steel mills? Those were built by the Soviet Union in alliance with China as part of the Communist Party and building the country up with 5-year plans. And they built storm levees and power plants. And, it was under the leadership of communists in Romania that the country was fully electrified, that illiteracy was wiped out. It was under the leadership of communists, in Eastern Europe, in Poland, and all these countries that you saw living standards start to rise. The first universities built, wiping out illiteracy, modern education, modern electrification, paving the roads. I was under the leadership of communists. And in addition to that, what else did you have in the countries that were anti-communist during these years, like South Korea, like the Philippines, like the Peronist governments in Argentina? What did you have there? You had the government, the state, right? In South Korea, how was South Korea's economy built up? Park Chung-hee, a military dictator backed by the United States, he used the government, the military, to build POSCO, the state-run steel industry, to build car manufacturers, to build steel manufacturers. I mean, he used the government to do it. Singapore, an anti-communist country led by Lee Kuan Yew. And what did Lee Kuan Yew use? He used the government to build up the economy. The Shah of Iran, right? U.S.-backed dictator, brutal dictator, but in the 1960s, he built up Iran. And how did he do it? He built it up with the government, and he built roads and highways, and he tried to stabilize Iran with his white revolution that he called it, and it involved the government building stuff. If you look at the greatest episode of economic expansion in all of human history, there was no free market capitalism going on. So this idea you have to have capitalism to have free market, expansion, that is not the truth. Right? Post-World War II, you had in the Western world what they called the Keynesian consensus. John Maynard Keynes was the British economist who was critical of free market policies and said the government must spend money. And the Keynesian consensus was to make sure nothing like Hitler ever happened again. The British government, the Western governments need to have a welfare state. They need to spend money. And in America, they talk about how we developed military Keynesianism, that the U.S. economy is largely dependent on the government spending billions and billions of dollars on weapons and guns and bombs and tanks to stabilize the economy. Military Keynesianism, right? Whereas in the Western European countries, you may have a welfare state. In the United States, we have military Keynesianism. The government spends money. This notion that the government can just sit back and the economy takes care of itself. No one talked that way until the 70s. Montpellier Society. You had the Austrian school folks. You had Milton Friedman. And suddenly it became trendy as the Western capitalist economies were crashing. As you had the first economic downturns in the early 70s, then in the late 70s, you had a very big economic downturn. And suddenly they rolled out these flim-flam men to tell us that the market was magic. And they didn't really believe that. What they believed was that we needed to make the poor people pay for the crisis, right? That we need to take the crisis out of the hides of poor people. We need to pay people less. We need labor unions to be weakened. We need to get rid of social programs. And so they invented an ideology that the rich don't even believe. They just use it as a battering ram against the poor. They don't believe that. They want the government to be managed. They want the government to manage the economy. They just want it to manage it in their interest. And they want the poor people to have to pay for it. So to justify cutting social programs, to justify the policies that they wage, to justify weakening labor unions, to justify cutting government jobs and cutting the jobs of government workers and hiring private contractors to do what the government normally does, they invented this flim-flam ideology that most academic economists will tell you is complete bunk. This notion of neoliberal economics, Austrian school economics, Ludwig von Mises, Milton Friedman, Friedrich von Hayek. It's all a bunch of crap, all right? It's not serious, and they don't even practice it. But it is used as a battering ram against the poor. That's all that it's used for. When they want to make the poor people pay for the crisis that the rich created, they say, well, this is just the economics. This is just what works. This stuff was all created by the Rockefellers. The Chicago School of Economics was funded by the richest of the rich. And it serves their agenda. And it is bunk and it's flim-flam. And everywhere it's been put into practice, we see a disaster. After the fall of the Soviet Union, they went into Eastern Europe and they implemented these policies. And it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare, right? In the 90s in Russia, it was, Yeltsin's government, auctioning off the country to the highest bidder. What was done all across, Ukraine was down to like 4 hours of electricity a day in certain cities. It was an absolute disaster, mass unemployment. They tried it in Latin America in the 1990s as well, right? Mass privatizations, the water fights in Bolivia. You can read about what was done in various places. At first, they did it in Chile after Pinochet, then in Argentina after the overthrow of Isabel Perón, and all across Latin America in the 90s. I was in Ecuador in 1999 when I was 12 years old, and I saw with my own eyes the results of these policies. These are absolutely disastrous policies. Neoliberalism does not work. Javier Milei's government in Argentina has been an absolute disaster, and it's been an absolute failure. The people in Argentina are suffering miserably under that government. But to these jackasses, do they ever, say, oh, that's because of capitalism? Of course not. But all of Venezuela's problems are because of socialism. China becoming a superpower with state central planning. Well, that couldn't be because of socialism. They must just be capitalist. And that's what I love. It's selective. That's what these guys are so obnoxious about, right? So the America First Committee are good, according to Mr. Brady. So they must be capitalist. Well, it's funny because Elizabeth Dilling, believed in National Socialism, and all kinds of them were advocating anti-capitalist theories, but they were good. So they must not be dirty, rotten socialists, Well, that's just, Norman Thomas was involved. People can be good people and disagree with you, right? Not all people. I admit this. There are people that I really respect, like Angela McCurdle, who disagree with me, who do good things. And I don't go, oh, she couldn't possibly do good things. She disagrees with. No, she disagrees with me. She does good things. But this guy's brain is so small that the America First Committee, which very obviously had lots of people in it that didn't advocate free market capitalism, but it had to have been because they're good. This is childish thinking, but it's just because he's motivated by hate, right? And he hates woke people. I don't blame him for that. Woke people can be very obnoxious, but woke people and the Soviet Union are not the same, right? There's a big difference, right? And that again, you don't know what you're talking about. And if you're motivated by hatred, this is what you're going to get. And then that other guy, now he comes at me with this, he gives me the classic Marxist definition of socialism, which if you read Lenin and all of that, we've moved on from there, right? We're not doing that anymore. And I would argue we're even further away from that with Deng Xiaoping theory and all that. I just pointed out that technically that's not where we're at, that socialism has come into the world as a result of struggles of national liberation, etc. And he just had to immediately start telling me how hard his life was, about how no one's ever worked as much as he has. And, an 8-hour day. And you went to college and you must live in a college area. I'm not as educated as you. No one's attacking you. No one's calling you stupid. What you said was right, according to Marx in the 1860s, but that's not how things worked out. And I'm trying to engage with you about what all of this means and why I don't call myself a socialist, why I'm an innovationist, because the world has changed and it's complicated. I'm trying to engage with him, and he just falls into this, woe is me, my life, I'm a veteran, I'm disabled, I went to prison. Dude, like no one's, but again, that's what motivates him. The world has been unfair to him. Sounds like it really has been unfair to him. But it seems like that's what motivates him. He feels that the world has been unfair to him. Some people have had it better than him, and I dared disagree with him. So then I turned into the one who had it better than him. I don't know anything about this guy, but based on what he's saying, sure, I'm not disabled. I am, have never been to prison, so I guess I've had a better life than him. I'm not going to argue that my life is better than him, but that in no way relates to the argument. But it seems like he's motivated by resentment, right? Whereas the right-wing libertarian is motivated by rage at the left, and he wants to just destroy the left, and they're all communists, and the free market is his way to just get revenge on all of them. Now this guy is motivated by resentment. The world has been really unfair to him, and it's like, I'm not arguing with either of these people about facts. I'm arguing with their rage, right? Their rage. And one of them has rage at the woke left, and the other has rage at people who've had a better life than him, and people that he perceives or sees as having a better life than him. And I'm trying to talk sense to both of them about how we can build a movement to fix our country, to end these wars, which I guess the libertarian guy wants to do, but I guess I'm not welcome in his movement because I don't agree with him about economics, because apparently this group that existed 100 years ago would never allow me to join, which actually that's not true. And then this guy, he doesn't want to organize with that. He wants to just wage a workers versus bosses 1930s, factory struggle, which that's not where things are at, buddy. We're heading towards a gig economy where every worker thinks he's a micro entrepreneur. And if you look at governments around the world that are fighting imperialism, They tend to promote private ownership with their micro entrepreneurship program in Nicaragua, with, you know, socialism with Chinese characteristics, and that it's not a struggle of the workers against the bosses. It's a struggle of society overall against the imperialist monopolies. And it's about having a state that is pro-humanity and pro-growth that breaks the power of the big monopolies. That's what it's about. And I'm just trying to explain this to you, right? But he just wants to talk like it's 1800, and we're just talking about the worker in the factory doesn't get paid a fair wage. And this is the problem, right? Is that when I see these people, we're not really talking about politics. We're talking about psychology. We're having almost a spiritual conversation, right? We're talking about who they're mad at. We're trying to reward. They're looking for validation in their rage. And, you know, one guy wants validation in his rage against the woke people, so he's embedded himself in anti-communism. And he's then blinded himself by it because he's not understanding how economics actually works. One guy is blinded by resentment and jealousy and self-pity. And so he's, you know, embedded himself in this kind of outdated class struggle Marxist kind of thing that doesn't exactly reflect current economic realities or how revolutions have actually ever happened. And they're both coming at this from negative places. And I think when Noah said what he said, which is about Twitter is not reality, X is not reality, it's true, because X tends to bring out people's negative emotions. And both of these people are motivated by very negative emotions. And if you have negative emotions, if that is your motivation, it's not going to lead any place good. Right. So anyway, that brings me to the last point I wanted to make on here, which is that after I was done interviewing people on the streets of New York City today, I walked. It wasn't a huge walk. I don't remember how long it took me, but it wasn't a short walk either. I walked from Union Square to 42nd Street. That's a decent walk. I walked because it wasn't raining yet. It had stopped raining. It was still a little damp out, and it wasn't raining. And I walked. I did a significant walk. And while I walked, I looked. I watched all the people around me, because I thought about the conversations that I'd had with people, interviewing them on the streets about the war in Iran and what they thought about it. And I just walked through this very, very densely populated area. New York City is very densely populated. And I just walked for a significant amount of time. And I realized that there is something spiritually valuable about walking, right? And that I'm looking at other people, and I'm seeing who's there, and I'm seeing the different types of people that are out there, and I'm seeing what they're doing. And that this is very, very spiritually valuable. And it's also very, very valuable if you're a serious organizer. I have talked on these streams many times about how part of the reason that we are patriotic socialists, part of the reason that we talk about socialism with American characteristics, is because if you want to build a real revolution in your country, you must love your country. Mao knew the people of China deeply, deeply well. He knew them like the back of his hand. He had an intimate connection, a deep spiritual connection with the people of China, and that's what enabled him to lead them to have a revolution. Stalin knew the people of the Russian Empire, and he knew them deeply, and he had a deep connection with them, and that's what enabled him to build the Soviet Union up into what it became. And that if we're going to have a society in America, if we're going to lead a movement to rescue America from imperialism and join the people of the world in building this country up, we must know our people, right? We must know our people so well that we can give voice to how they feel, that it's not simply a matter of talking at them. It's not simply a matter of studying old books and knowing them, that we must have a deep connection with the people. And Mao Zedong wrote about this in the little red book. There's this part on the mass line: from the masses to the masses. The masses are the water, the revolutionary is the fish. And I actually wanted to read to you tonight. This is a good book. It's called The Morning Deluge: Mao Zedong and the Chinese Revolution, 1893 to 1954. And it was written by Han Suyin. This is Han Suyin. Now, Han Suyin is a Chinese-American novelist. She wrote a romance novel that was a bestseller in the 1950s called Love is a Many Splendored Thing. And you know, it was just a popular novel, romance novel. They made it into a movie. She became quite wealthy, quite a famous romance novelist. And then when the Cultural Revolution happened in China, she loved Mao. She loved Mao Zedong. She moved back to China, and she wrote many books about Chinese communism and the Chinese Revolution and all kinds of different things. And she wrote, you know, 2 parts. This is the first part, The Morning Deluge. And the second part is called Wind in the Tower. And it's her books on the history of communism in China and the life of Mao Zedong. And I found this book to be particularly inspiring. So I'm going to read you. I'm going to read to you about Mao and how he walked from one end of China to another. This is in 1917. Since a good mind and a good body was an act of will, it was will which Mao strove to cultivate, and will drove him to uncommon purpose. Energy was in nature. One was energized by contact with her. Long walks in the hills for days, barefoot, bare-breasted, to imbibe the sun, the rain, cold swims in the rivers and the ponds. On each holiday, with or without companions, Mao would walk the land from village to village. A copy of a newspaper loaned to Mao by a teacher told a story about 2 students traveling across China on foot and reaching Tibet. Mao read it and was much interested. He wanted to walk all over China. Little did he know that his wish would be fulfilled, and how. In the summer of 1917, Mao set out across the Hunan province on foot, journeying through many counties, accompanied by one of the Shao brothers. In the farmhouses where they rested, receiving hospitality from the peasants, Mao inquired about conditions of crops and rain, of rent and landlords, a peasant talking to other peasants, but also a budding social scientist and researcher. Mao kept notes on what he had been told, and he remembered the peasants' names. He walked over 300 miles on the trip. Then, in the autumn of that year of 1917, Mao founded with a friend, Xiuhyang, the New People's Study Society. The significance for the Chinese Revolution to come of this society cannot be overestimated, nor what it represented as a training in leadership for Mao. For about a year, he had entertained the idea of organizing a society in which people would debate new ideas and create new analysis for themselves, a new personality by discussion, debate, self-analysis, and action. The idea of becoming changed by argument and debate, by contact with reality and personal experience, he was later to expand, refine, and apply to the making of revolutionaries. Feeling expansive and the need for a few intimate companions, he asserted an advertisement in a newspaper, signed under a pseudonym for which he wrote articles, 28 strokes. In addition, he explained his project for the organization of a society of young men, active, resolute, and patriotic. I specified youth who were hardened and determined and ready to make sacrifices for their country. Mao's New People's Study Society was only one of many such student groups, but it grew into something else, the core of a political party. From the start, it stipulated action as well as debate. It would not only talk revolution, but practice. First of all, revolutionizing its own members, turning them into new men, even if it had no political label, nor any stated aim, but the pursuit of truth and knowledge, and their translation into deeds. The nucleus was formed of what would later become a society that was to have widespread influence on the affairs and destiny of China. Now that's from the Morning Deluge. So Mao, before he even built his revolutionary organization, he walked 300 miles. 300 miles just talking to people and getting to know them and remembering their names I'm asking them about their life, about their job, about their conditions, just talking to people. And after he walked 300 miles, he formed a society. But that society was not simply about promoting political ideas. It was about transforming people through struggle, by getting people involved in the struggle and having them become transformed in the process, right? About how people would encounter reality and become new men or new people by engaging with ideas. This is all very, very, very important. And that's why it occurred to me, as a result of, these awful conversations that happened today, as a result of interviewing people on the street, that this practice might be something that CPI members should consider doing. Go on a walk. Go on a walk, but go on that walk absorbing what you see. Absorbing what you see and interpreting it like a revolutionary. Walk from one place to another. Make a commitment to yourself. I'm going to walk from this place to this place. But while I do it, I am going to interpret the world around me as a revolutionary. And I think that this is a good challenge because you can do it all by yourself. You don't need anybody. I guess Mao had a companion with him, but ultimately you can do it by yourself. And I think that our members of CPI, in order to heighten their revolutionary ability, you should, if you have a time where you don't have anything else going on, set a location, walk from one place to another place. Doesn't have to be long. It can be an hour walk. It can be a whole day walk. It can be, 2 hours walk. But absorb everything you see as you are thinking about building a revolutionary movement. This might sound silly. People are like, Caleb, what are you talking about? We're going to go on a little walk. Yes, actually, because that's what Mao did. He walked. He walked and he observed the society that he lived in. And he engaged with it. And it wasn't just observing people. You saw he was observing nature. He was absorbing energy from nature. That's what the first thing that Han Soo-yin wrote about in there. He was absorbing energy from nature. And I feel like that is something that if you are wanting to become a more serious revolutionary organizer, if you're wanting to fine-tune your skills as an activist, as an organizer, as an analyst, I would challenge you to go for a walk. Go on a Hunan walk. We'll call it a Hunan walk because Mao's historic walk that I just read was from the Hunan province. Go on a Hunan walk. Hunan walking, right? Walk and observe people as you go. Absorb energy from nature. And in the process, be fine-tuning your skills as you can strive to be someone who builds a movement to rescue our country from imperialism. I challenge our members to do Hunan walks. I think that's a great thing. Even if you're the only member in your area, you can do it. Make a commitment to yourself. I am going to walk for 1 hour. I'm going to start at this part of my little town or my village or my city, and I'm going to go to this end, and I'm going to do it with a revolutionary mindset, right? Put your phone in your pocket. Don't take your phone out, right? Maybe put some music on if you want, but you don't even have to do that. And just walk with a revolutionary, optimistic, constructive, innovationist mindset. Absorb the world around you and all the energy around you and analyze things as you look at them and think about building a revolutionary movement. Think, right? And Wallace Wattles, I was just reading to you about Mao, but I love Wallace Wattles. Wallace Wattles, the great American socialist, right? I listened to his writing day long. I listened to audio recordings of his books because they've been so helpful to me. And there's a passage from him where he makes a similar observation. And I'll pull that one up. Right? Let me pull that one up. Where he says a similar thing, right? And it's in his book, How to Promote Yourself, or The Making of a Man Who Can. That's a very particularly good book. And I'll put it, I will find the passage here. Goodness gracious. Just have to find a version of the text that I can open. But he has a passage that is also particularly, it basically says the same thing. I can just find it here. So many places that want to charge me for it. It's in the public domain. This is very annoying. Yeah, I want to find this passage where he talks about how everything you encounter can be valuable to you, right? All right, here, I think I can find it here. All right. Every person you meet, every dog that barks at you or wags its tail as it passes you, all have some element of usefulness to you if you want to find it. Study them all, for they are your opportunities. Most men and women fail by waiting for some particular kind of opportunity instead of being ready to seize every opportunity. I will even copy that and I will put that in a tweet right now, because I'll obviously give credit to Wallace Wattles who said it, but that is a really, really powerful quotation. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, hold on. Hold your horses. All right. Every person you meet, here, I'll just type it. Every person you meet, comma, every dog that barks, comma, or the dog that barks at you, comma, or wags its tail as it passes you, or wags its tail as it passes you, all have some element of usefulness to you if you will find it. Study them all. Study them all. For they are your opportunities. For they are your opportunities. Most men and women fail for some particular kind. Most of women fail by waiting for some particular kind of opportunity instead of being ready to seize every opportunity. Wallace D. Wattles. Every person you meet, every dog that barks at you or wags its tail as it passes you, all have some element of usefulness to you, if you will find it. Every person you meet, every dog that barks at you or wags its tail as it passes you, all have some element of usefulness to you if you will find it. Study them, for they are your opportunities. Most men and women fail by waiting for some particular kind of opportunity instead of being ready to seize every opportunity. That is a darn good quotation, and I just tweeted it out. And if you go look at my Twitter, I will put it on Twitter. I just tweeted it out. And now I'm going to put it as a quotation here on, I'm going to make a graphic of it, right? I just made a graphic of it. And I'm just going to size the text. I'm going to put it on the screen. That is such a good quotation. Okay. All right, here, I'm just making a graphic of it to put it on the screen. That is a really, really amazing quotation. And it's what Mao was talking about, right? How he went from one end of China to another, studying everything, exploring everything, and turning everything into an opportunity to make himself a better revolutionary organizer. That's the point. That is the point. Let me just... All right. I have to pick a good font. There we go. All right. Now we have a graphic to put it on the screen because it's important. It's a very, very important quotation. So let's put it on the screen. Every person you meet, every dog that barks at you or wags its tail as it passes you, all have some element of usefulness to you if you will find it. Study them all, for they are your opportunities. Most men and women fail by waiting for some particular kind of opportunity instead of being ready to seize every opportunity. I love that. And it's exactly what Mao is talking about, what Han Suyin is describing that Mao Zedong did when he walked across China. And ultimately, if you want to be a serious revolutionary and you want to build a movement to rescue your country from decaying imperialism, this is what you need to do. You need to go on a walk, go on a Hunan walk. And while on that walk, absorb everything. Absorb every dog that barks at you, every person you meet as an opportunity. So I hope that you all will take something from that. And I hope you all will go on Hunan walks. And I hope that you all will get involved in CPI because, you know, we've got important work to do. All right, folks, names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? All right, Nabil from Pakistan. Good to see you, Nabil. Madeline in Maine. Good to see you, Madeline. Chicago. Lawrence in Chicago. Good to see you. All right. John in Florida. Good to see you, John. Good to see you. Justin in Salt Lake. Good to see you, Justin. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Marvin in New Jersey. A lot of new names tonight. That's neat. We got people that don't usually watch, or maybe they've been silent before, and that's great. We got a lot of new names popping up tonight. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Who is with us? Names and locations. Michael in Manchester, UK. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? British Columbia, Canada. Camila. Very good. Names and locations. Samuel in the Far East. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Anybody? Names and locations. 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 Who is with us? Who is with us? Who's with us? Anybody? Ryan in Kansas City is with us. Ryan in Kansas City. Good to see you, Ryan. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Glad you're here with us. Good to see you. Anybody else? Names and locations? If not, we will now, at this point, do, so basically, like I said, I answer people's questions in the second half of the show. One question has already been sent via Buy Me a Coffee, but I hope to, Pensacola, Florida, and Jim in Chicago. Good to see you. All right. Basically, if you want to send a question, the best way to do it is go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin and send your question. That's the best way to do it. So please go there and do that right now. I'm going to put on a song, a piece of music. Scott in Pennsylvania. So many new people. This is good. We're going to put on a song while I go and use the bathroom and drink some water. And then I'm going to come back on and answer your questions. So why don't I put on a song? What song should I put on? I'm going to look. Right. All right. Okay. What song should I put on? Oh, I know. I will put on, since we're talking about China, I'm going to put on the music of the Red Detachment of Women, right? This is one of my favorite pieces of music. This is a Chinese opera about a revolutionary group of soldiers. It's just a beautiful, exciting piece of music. So this is the Chinese orchestra performing Red Detachment of Women. Here we go. Yeah, that's a really powerful and amazing piece of music. It was one of the 8 model works during the Cultural Revolution, the Red Detachment of Women. And since people like it, I'm putting the link in the chat just so people can have it. It's during the Cultural Revolution in China. They did a lot to make art promote communist values. They had 8 model works, 8 works of art that were considered like the model works of socialist realism. One of them was The White-Haired Girl, and that was The Red Detachment of Women, which was a ballet, and it's still a very popular ballet in China. So yeah, The Red Detachment of Women. All right. So on that note, folks, if you have something you would like me to talk about, the best way to do it would be to send me a buy me a coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com. One person has already done that. And then Hempcar sent 2 Rumble rants. So yeah, unless anyone's got any more questions, I'm going to answer these questions and then we'll be done. So yeah, go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin and send any additional questions that you might have. That would be appreciated. Always, always, always appreciated. All right. So the first question that's come in is from someone called Joey in Minneapolis. He says, I'm a first-generation Mexican American who has had family here illegally. What I heard expressed by my family about the ICE protests in Minneapolis was mostly confusion and disagreement about protesters being so cavalier, engaging with ICE in such a physically aggressive manner. There definitely seemed to be a sentiment that the predominantly white protesters were doing this for their own political purposes, which I would say is the anti-Trump cult of personality, more than actually representing the desires and wills of immigrants. Another thing that I felt was that the protesters seemed to resemble the style of anti-government protests in color revolutions, i.e. the Gene Sharp style method of antagonizing law enforcement. I'm interested in your thoughts on this. Well, Joey, that is very interesting to me. I obviously don't claim to speak for Mexican Americans, but that matches what I saw. First of all, the amount of Somalis they've piled into Minneapolis is not accidental. It's related to geopolitics. People are getting rewarded with visas. It's part of, the USA setting up shop and expanding its influence on the Horn of Africa. The other thing that seems clear to me, based on what was revealed about the fraud in Minneapolis, it very much seems that there's some kind of Muslim mafia, probably linked to the Muslim Brotherhood, that the Democrats are mobbed up with. And I'm hearing stuff about here in New York City, and there's corruption going on, and that the intelligence apparatus of this country has been courting the Muslim Brotherhood as proxies to use against various anti-imperialist states. And it appears that the Muslim Brotherhood and Muslims in Somalia have been brought into one particular city that was headed by and run by the Democratic Party machine. There's something intelligence related going on here, and it seems that Trump and his wing of the government opposes it. And this is deep state on deep state stuff. I will say the protesters out in Minneapolis were abominable to deal with. I am not somebody who disagrees with them. I don't think that ICE raids are helping in any way. I think the crisis of mass migration is a result of imperialism and decay. It's a result of countries being ground into poverty. It's a result of the destabilization and the wars that the Western countries have been imposing on the developing world. And, it's obviously a problem that so many people are coming into the United States illegally, but you're not going to solve that by terrorizing immigrant communities. And all the things that conservatives want to do about it make things worse. For example, is it true that immigrants often work for less than minimum wage? Yes. Is that legal? No. If you're a boss in this country, you have to pay minimum wage. Why do employers get away with it? Because immigrants are afraid of being deported. And so they're not going to report it. They're not going to tell on their employer. So if you make immigrant communities more afraid, they're not going to demand higher pay. They're not going to report their employers for paying them less than minimum wage. Gangs, crime. Is it true that there's a lot of gangs and crime among undocumented workers? Absolutely. And what's one way to make sure those gangs flourish? Make people afraid to call the police. Make it so immigrant communities won't cooperate with law enforcement because they're afraid of being deported. Make it so that if one gang is terrorizing you, you don't dare call the police. You better just call up the other gang to protect you. Make it so people can't enter the country legally. So how do they get in? They smuggle into the country, right? And who does that? Those illegal gangs. Makes the problem worse, right? All the things that conservatives want to do make the problem worse, right? And that's the thing. But when it really gets down to it, the motivation for a lot of conservative anti-immigrant rhetoric is they don't really want to solve the problem. They're upset about the circumstances, which they're right to be upset about it. The fact that so many people are coming into this country, not good. The fact that living standards have gone down, not good. The fact that, the next generation is stuck in low-wage, short-term service sector jobs, not good. The fact that our roads are falling apart. Yeah, this country's got a lot of problems. But hurting somebody else doesn't solve the problem. But a lot of the resentment, and I've talked about this before, a lot of the people that just blindly support Trump, which, I used to cut Trump supporters a lot more slack than I do right now. With Trump, a lot of the problem is they're not thinking, how can I solve the problem? They're thinking, I'm feeling bad. So if I can make somebody else feel bad, that will solve my problem. Well, it won't solve your problem. That's, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, right? So the idea is that if I'm upset and I'm pissed off about the way things are in the country, you're absolutely right to be doing that. So if I see ICE being mean to people and terrorizing people and they get hurt and they get upset, that solves the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. All right. I would actually like to find a solution. But, and a lot of Trump supporters, that unfortunately, and that's why they're supporting Trump bombing Iran, right? A lot of Trump supporters are not. People like Tucker Carlson are not, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, but a lot of the Trump supporters that are, it's like they're mad and the establishment that they're mad at doesn't like Trump. They like Trump and Trump is blowing some stuff up and killing some people. So he must be fighting that establishment that they don't like. He must be making that establishment pay. He's not. That establishment hates Iran, wants to overthrow Iran. But it's they like the idea of Trump hurting people because they're feeling hurt, and that doesn't solve the problem. Now, what Joey raised about those protesters, look, I have been going to protests my whole life. I've been going to pro-immigrant protests for years. I don't have an issue with protesters in general. These are obnoxious, woke human beings. That that I'm not law enforcement. I'm not an ICE operative. And I basically had to be undercover to cover these goddamn protests. Everywhere I went, there was some asshole with a whistle who demanded to know what news agency I was with. And, it was really, really uncomfortable being out there. And there were some really, really uncomfortable circumstances where people were ready to fight me. And I wasn't, and I don't even disagree with these people, but they're just looking for a fight. They're obnoxious people, and they also don't believe that people have the right to disagree with them, right? They in their minds, you either agree with them or you're a bad person who deserves to be murdered, is what they believe. And I'm sick and tired of that. And whether it's the trans issue, no matter what it is, they're right. And if you disagree with them, you should be murdered. You're a bad person. They don't want to have a conversation with you about economics. They don't know anything. All they know is I'm right, and everyone who disagrees with me is a bad person, and therefore, and I'm a victim somehow. I'm a victim, or I'm standing with victims. And so if you don't agree with me, you're a victimizer, and therefore anything we do to you, any way that we can harm you, is justified. And it's really, really obnoxious. And yeah, I can understand what Joey is saying. Now, I don't know who this person Joey is. He sounds like somebody who has some real experience. I found those protesters to be very, 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 very obnoxious. And the fact that I'm there and I basically agree with them, I don't support ICE, and I feared for my safety covering their protest, just reporting on their activities in a pretty neutral way. That tells you something. All right, cool. Another question that I've had before has come in from Jacob. He says, thoughts on Florida gubernatorial candidate James Fishbook. He's considered a crusader of dissident MAGA. I went to several of his rallies recently to ask questions and attempt to push the Overton window left. Okay, good for you. He said he would consider collectivizing Florida's overpriced electrical utilities, a prospect that most Republicans is like holy water to a vampire. Link to the clip below. Oh, wow. So this is a clip of you actually asking about something at his rally. Okay, well, I'm going to put that on. I think that's really, really cool. It's somebody in our community engaged with him. And I think I was going to tell you what I think of the guy first, but actually, because you have a clip here of you talking to this guy, I should put the clip on. So yeah, before I say anything else, we'll just play your clip. Congratulations. This is what we need, right? We need people that are part of this community to go places and ask questions and do stuff like this, right? This is good. This is good that you did this, right? I mean, even if he didn't give you a good answer, like this is awesome. So somebody who's part of our community with our live streams went to an event where dissident MAGA people, right? This Fishbeck guy is now critical of Israel, and this is good. Okay, I'm glad you did this. So we'll watch this clip. You know, I was going to just tell you what I think of Fishbeck, but now I just think this is awesome. We need more people going out and doing stuff.
Their utility rates in half by collectivizing their utility companies. Why not just work with the legislature to invoke eminent domain and transition FPL from a privately owned monopoly to a publicly owned utility?
Nothing is off the table. Let me just say that. Nothing is off the table. My goal is singular, which is to bring down electricity prices from breaking the back of our older folks, of our young families, of our working couples. Nothing is off the table. And I'm not going to let the Republican establishment cry socialism because we're delivering price cuts for working families.
Oh, that last part there was great. Nothing is off the table. It's like, well, okay, that's not an answer. But then when he said that second part, that was pretty bold. I generally don't like this Fishbeck guy. Generally, I just see the Fishbeck guy as a Nick Fuentes. You know, he's just pandering to racism. And I've seen some interviews he's done, and I've also seen him be insanely pro-Israel and stuff. And he suddenly changed his opinion, you know, and he just seems to, you know, and he really hates China. He obsessively hates China in a lot of his interviews and stuff. So I don't generally have a positive opinion of the guy. And at first, when he just said nothing is off the table, I was like, eh. But then when he said, and I'm not, he knew what he was saying, and I'm not going to let the Republican establishment cry socialism. Well, that means he's not ideologically committed to this free market crap. So that's a good sign. So I'm glad you did that, Jacob. I'm glad you went there, and we need more people to do that. And are you a CPI member, Jacob? Are you a member of CPI? Because if so, we could publicize this. Do you want us to publicize it? Inbox me. Send me an email, calebmaupin@gmail.com, if you want me to publicize this clip or not. I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing to do. You may not want to, you may just be a viewer or something, but if you're CPI aligned or a member or whatever, we could publicize that. So email me if you'd like us to do an article for the CPI website about that intervention. I think that would be a good thing because we need people to do stuff like that. That's a really important thing to do. And I'm glad that you did it. I am glad that you did that thing. So there we go. And it's also important you went, you know, a lot of people would just say, oh, this Fishbeck guy, whatever, he's this, he's that. Well, you got to go places where there's people you don't like, right? That's part of what organizing means. You don't always just go to places where people are predisposed to agree with you. You go to places where people are not predisposed to agree with you. Right. And that's something I've been urging people to really understand, this notion that we're going to find niche people who agree. We got to get past that. We got to get past that. Right. Right. Okay. Well, how should we describe you, Jacob? Email me about what you want to go with this when we publicize it. Yeah, we'll definitely publicize that. We need to get past this notion that we can only agree with people in our niche. We have to go wherever people are. And the best people that CPI has found are people we've found who would never go looking for this. Right. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but honestly, there's a lot of people who agree with us intellectually, and they're just kind of looking for entertainment, and they'll eventually change the channel. But people that get involved in this community, that see that we're a community of people doing stuff and get involved in our work, and learn what we believe based on being part of the community, and then recruit other people, like that's what an organization is made up of, right? Look, there's a lot of people on the internet who agree right now, right? And they might agree with me right now, but if they just keep listening, if all this is an internet TV show, eventually they're going to change the channel. And we all met these people. At first they were a communist, and then they were an anarchist, and then they were a Trotskyist, and then they were a Buddhist, and they were a Catholic. And it's just a form of internet intellectual stimulation, entertainment. And they never really become any of those things because they're just passively observing. Well, none of this stuff is intended to be entertainment, right? This stuff that we do here is intended to be about building an organization. And my goal here is to bring you into an organization. So yeah, going out and doing stuff, and that's really, really important. Okay. All right. On that note, okay, so Hempcar sent 2 Rumble rants. One was he wanted me to show a video of the glass mosque in Iran. So we'll put that on. The glass mosque in Iran.
To wander this mausoleum in Shiraz, Iran, is like stepping into the holiest of light shows. The Shah Cheragh, which roughly translates to King of the Light in Persian, is a funerary monument and mosque, a beautiful holy place for thousands of Muslim worshippers. The structure is made of multicolored pieces of tile and glass, and is considered to be the 3rd most important pilgrimage site in Iran. Initially started around 900 AD as a burial site for an important Shia Muslim figure, the mosque continued to be expanded and improved. The decision to adorn the mosque with its iconic mirror ball decoration came from Queen Tash Khatun in the 14th century. She wanted the mosque to intensify any light 1,000 times over, in homage to the mosque's name. Although meant to be a holy shrine and important pilgrimage location for Shia Muslims, people of any faith can marvel at the mosque's immense beauty.
That's neat. When I was in Iran, I don't think I ever saw that particular site. So that's very neat. And then he wanted me to react to this other clip of, what was it, of Peace in Every Step. So we'll put that on.
I was in Washington, D.C., marching with 400 people in silence and breathing. And before visiting the Vietnam War Memorial, we stopped close to the Lincoln Memorial. And I said this: please do your best to prevent this war. I know that your country is beautiful. Your children are beautiful. But their country is also beautiful. Their children is also beautiful. Do your best to prevent it. Because once the war starts, hatred will be born. And it will drag on for many, many generations. Those of you who have touched the war directly, you are something like the flame at the tip of the candle. It's hot, but it has the power of shining and illuminating. I have suffered a lot. I have known what is the war. I have seen brothers and sisters dying. And I myself escaped death in a very narrow way. Now I realize that those of us who have experienced the war directly, we have a duty to bring the truth of the war to the people who did not have a direct experience about war. And that is what I call the practice of looking deeply and sharing our insight. We are the best people that can do it.
Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, scholar, poet, and teacher. In his books and with direct action, he has been campaigning for world peace and reconciliation for over 50 years.
And I am qualified to talk.
Yeah, I know that during the Vietnam War period, there was a very big fear on the part of American intelligence that many people would become communists. And so there were a lot of like mystical gurus and others that were like propped up by the American government as a way that people could be against war and be vaguely pacifist, but also be anti-communist, right? And that, you know, like the classic example of that is the Hare Krishna movement that was imported to the United States during the 1970s, the International Society, or during the 1960s, early 60s, actually, International Society of Krishna Consciousness and all of that. And I've heard this name before. This guy's a very prominent Buddhist teacher. And he's anti-communist. And, you know, I mean, he's pushing a pacifist message. And I guess if he's against the Vietnam War, that's a good thing. But I don't know. My feeling is that ultimately the cause of these wars is globalism, imperialism, right? And that we need a system that doesn't put profits over people, and that the Western imperialist system is the cause, and that we can't, you know, I mean, obviously I'm all about reconciliation, and I don't believe in the Marxist, worldview of rebellion and destruction as being the road to everything. I believe that we need an optimistic vision. So I have a more nuanced understanding, but I'm a little bit cautious with some of the pacifist spiritual stuff. I'm a little cautious with it to some degree, I'll be honest. But I should know more about it. And especially as I do stuff at the UN and all that kind of perspective is very, very big at the UN. And I helped with an event organized by those kind of people a couple of weeks ago, actually. And it looks like I might be doing something again with a crowd of people that are very similar to that. So, you know, I need to know more about these circles. I honestly don't. And in the past, when I was kind of a dogmatic communist, my view was to just kind of dismiss all these people. And I think that just like with anything else, there are different ways of interpreting things. But that kind of stuff is really big in like the United Nations and the NGO world and such. Just FYI, our stream has been blocked on Facebook because that video that Hempcar sent me of the mosque apparently is copyrighted. So our stream has been removed from Facebook because of that. Just FYI, Hempcar. That's why I'm careful showing clips. When people just send me, oh, play this song, you got to be careful with that, right? Because now people were watching on Facebook and now they can't see it anymore because I showed a clip and it got flagged, right? Now, usually on YouTube, they just collect any revenue or whatever. But, you know, unfortunately, yeah, my Facebook, stream has been taken down. It's been blocked now on Facebook. So you got to be careful with that kind of thing. But, it is what it is, Hempcar. I mean, it doesn't look like my account's being shut down and we haven't gotten flagged anywhere else. But, you got to be, I always try to be really, really careful showing stuff like that. Most people don't care. Most people are happy that you show their clips. News agencies and all of that, you're showing their stuff, right? You're promoting them. But there are some people, I don't know what it is. They are just crazy protective of their stuff. They don't want anyone to hear their music. They don't want, and they can be really, really nasty about that kind of thing. So, I mean, this is the whole thing about, intellectual property is something that has to exist under our system of capitalism, right? Because, I mean, if not, but at the same time, it's unfairly applied in a lot of cases. And on top of that, at the end of the day, it doesn't really fit, right? Everything that exists is a product of everything else. Nothing exists in a vacuum. So where do you draw the line of plagiarism, right? Because everything is a product of its environment, and that environment involves other people being creative, and the creativity that they do. I mean, there's really nothing is made. No one can point to anything in this world and say, I made that all by myself. Nobody, right? Everything that exists is the product of collective labor and the collective environment created by all mankind. So that's something to think about. So on that note, I'm going to put on the closing music. It's been fun, everybody. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Join the Center for Political Innovation. And some exciting stuff is planned for the end of the month. So keep your eye out for what we have to say about that. All right. Thanks, everybody. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.